I like
Doing
the image
well.
quality. I like you're very clear. You do look very chilly, though. I will say that.
Yeah, it is a little bit, but I'm nice and bundled up. It's warm enough in here.
Right. Oh, that's good. That's good. Um, let's see. So, okay. So I was just looking at my current update of my channel warning right now because I got another, but nothing has changed. So hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone's doing well. Just hanging out here, having my second cup of coffee. I chatted with Rage this morning. Actually, we were taking a look at he mentioned this on the after party after show yesterday about a debate between a YouTuber named Vosh and non-compete. And I took a look at the first hour of that because that's when the actual debate happened between the two men. And yeah, we might Rage and I might do a team up video to talk about it.
Oh, cool. Heck yeah.
Because there are issues. There are issues. And I just want to say this, right, for everyone here who's like, for those of you who are, who are to the left, who are progressives, who are socialists, um, we're not going to be able to get a fair and equitable kind of Northern European, Scandinavian kind of government unless there is racial equity, unless there is a racial, unless there because, and I can't even believe I have to say this, but people here know this, right? So if you're new here, I guess it's important to point out that if you are a progress, if somehow that you're a leftist, and if you don't think that we have to deal with the racial inequality of this country, I think you're digging your own grave. I think you're just tilting at windmills because the cardinal sin of the United States of America is racism. It's from soup to nuts, and this is the thing that has to be resolved. And I'm going to say this: one of the problems with Bernie Sanders, right? Even though he has done great work in terms of racial equity in this country, he was just perceived. He was perceived not to be interested as much in racial equity, which is partly because of corporate Democrats. But yeah, so that was just my morning thoughts after watching this video of Vosh and non-compete doing their so-called debate, because it was just a crappy internet debate, because there's no moderator. It was just this kind of rolling brawl, rhetorical brawl that YouTube loves. People love that. And unfortunately, it's just crap.
Huh.
So yeah, I don't know
Well,
why.
we gotta stay vigilant. That's gonna be an issue that it always needs to be brought up and make sure that we are being ethical about being equal to
Yeah,
all races,
yeah,
to every little individual, to every yeah, to every group. That should be something that is like set up like to where it is it happens every year, at every quarter or whatever. We need to be
yeah.
looking at that and
Yeah,
making sure.
and once again, it's important to develop the skeptic slash humanist ear, right? The ear, so that when you start hearing certain messages, whether it's on TV or whether it's on YouTube or on Twitter, anywhere, that you're saying to yourself, "Wow, something doesn't sound right about this message." And then to take time and reflect on that and to see what was wrong with it. Yeah, yeah. But Rage isn't here. I could just rage. I could just rage about it. But maybe I'm gonna try to keep it's. And this is what makes it so difficult for me is I get really excited about things, and oftentimes how someone's wrong about a topic, and I just want to start talking about it. Looking at you, Mr. Vosh. But I'm going to hold it in. I'm going to hold it in. That's what I'm going to do.
I've actually only seen like I've only seen a couple of conversations with Vosh.
Yeah.
I don't uh, know a whole lot about the guy
Yeah.
or what kind of channel he runs.
Yeah. I've only seen this one discussion, and if that is how the man runs the channel, and and there needs to be more data points. Don't get me wrong, right? But this seems to be typical of his behavior. I'm gonna take a look at a couple of his other videos, but we'll see. You know, I don't want to use the term stochastic racist. I guess I just did. As in the strategy of Donald Trump using stochastic racism, stochastic terrorism. He didn't say the terrorist words. He didn't tell people to directly go out and commit acts of terrorism. But what he did was that he created an environment where people would be incentivized to act in that manner. And yeah, I would see. I just said I wasn't going to talk about it, but now I am. You can say words that would create a positive, that would incentivize racist activity, and that's what Mr. Vosh does from just watching that video. So yeah, a stochastic racist. I'll say that, and I'll say it right now. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever.
Yeah, I think the word is hyperbolic. Like Trump's language was hyperbolic in
Yeah.
that, like, he would use words like fight and these people are bad.
Right.
Like it, and really, whenever it comes down to it, we just need to have good arguments. We don't need to go actually fight. We're not going to go pick up guns and let's go grab our bats and, chainsaws out of and go war with everybody. Like, no, this stuff needs to be talked about, and it needs, the information needs to really, it just, we
Yeah.
need to totally saturate the internet with critical thinking.
Yeah, and when it comes to winning hearts and minds, because that's what we're trying to do, and yeah, it may be close to impossible of winning hearts and minds on the hard right, but there's a vast majority of people, at least 50% of the people here in the States, who are on in the middle and want to get change, who want, who are interested in different points of views, and who can be swayed. To tell you the truth, it's 420. Good morning, sir.
Sammy.
I think it's more good morning. Yes, I think it's safe to say it's morning over there too. Yeah.
20 to 2.
22.
20 to 20 to 2.
Oh, 20 to 2. Oh, sir. My heart goes out to you. I was up this morning at 3:30. I was up at because I ate too many, and this is true. I ate too many KFC Impossible chicken nuggets, and they formed a barnacle somewhere in my stomach or my large intestine. And when I eat like that, and they weren't even good, everyone. They weren't even good. But this is the first time I've had like KFC, like the wondrous herbs and spices for so long that I'm like must feed them into mouth. And yeah, it made me wake up like at 3:30. I was up for like an hour. I went back to sleep, but I feel the sleep deprivation, Sammy. That's what I'm saying. I feel it.
Yeah,
dude. There was a time I actually spent time with some Muslims. I've worked for them. I've even taken on things like fasting and things like that. And dude, I went a long period of time where I did not eat any pig or any kind of fried stuff.
Yeah.
And it eventually became to a point where I was like, I really don't, buy into a lot of this stuff. And I really want some greasy fried fucking Long John Silvers.
Right.
All right. I binged on this stuff,
what
dude.
are they?
I ended up getting just like it sickened me. Like I ate too much. It was gross.
What's a Long John Silver? David?
Long John Silvers. Oh,
it's horrible.
timbers. You don't know about
horrible.
Long John Silvers?
It sounds like an American thing.
It's like codfish, and it's just fried codfish,
Arguably.
hush puppies, French fries.
and people in the chat can tell, or
Hush
people watching
puppies?
can tell me if I'm wrong or not. It's like the lowest tier of fast food. That's been my
Are they
experience.
even still around?
I don't think they are, dude. They're so bad that for a fast food organization, they have imploded. That's how bad they were.
Yeah.
Worse than Taco Bell. Worse than McDonald's.
Wow. Oh, I just realized this is a tape. This is from a store.
Yeah, it's a chain of restaurants, brother. It was a chain of restaurant, Long John Silver's. There was one in the city that I grew up in, and that died out. It just, disappeared. But the KFC I went to last night was in the next city over, and we got the last. We got the last of the Impossible Nuggets or the Impossible Chicken, and yeah, not worth the time, definitely. And then they were out of French fries. What kind of place can be out of French fries?
What?
They were out of French fries, and I had to eat the nasty mashed potatoes. Had to, in quotes. All right, maybe I was binging last night. Maybe I was just binging on horrible food. Everyone, perhaps.
It tastes so good. I don't know.
Yeah. So I had a come to Jesus moment this morning about not I gotta get right with dietary Jesus. Just I got scared straight last night.
Right on.
Yeah, I was. What have you been up to, Sam? Besides getting good sleep, apparently.
Yeah. Just working. Really, that's all I do.
Yeah. How goes the business?
Really well.
Yeah. Because it's
still going.
That's good.
Great.
That's good. It's summertime over there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not summertime here. I think it's
called. And it doesn't feel like summertime here either. I had a jumper on today.
No, a jumper. I know what that is.
A hoodie.
A hoodie. Right.
So, and that's in Australia in summer. I had a hoodie on.
Yeah, that's odd.
So I don't know.
So what's going on with that Serbian tennis guy? The Jovic, or he's supposed to be
Djokovic. Is it Djokovic? Yeah. He got an exemption.
Yeah, I've heard that that's a lot of BS that he got an exemption. It was an illegal exemption too. So
it is. Yeah. And he's copping a lot of flack, but this very unfortunately popular commentator in Australia, who I disagree with on most issues, made a good point where he said people need to lay off Dokic, or Djokovic, or whoever the hell the guy is, because he didn't do anything. It's the people that make these stupid fucking laws.
Incorrect.
And then
I believe it or not, I'm angry about this. I'm angry. I want to say hello to Jesse Bear too before I start ranting about it.
Yeah.
Hello, Jesse.
Hello. Sorry, there are toddler noises in the background.
I thought that was you.
I was about to hear a big sneeze.
Oh, it's okay, sweetie. Sorry.
This is the miracle of live shows right here, everyone. Real life going on right here. So as I understand it, Australia does not allow medical exemptions if you've contracted COVID-19 like this tennis star has, because this is this whole basis for getting a medical exemption is that he said, I had COVID-19 recently, and that means I can get my medical exemption. However, the actual Australian law says that doesn't count as a medical exemption.
Yeah. Well, you are right. He's obviously done the dodgy.
Mm.
But I think the point this guy was trying to make was that, like, who's let him get away with it?
Mm.
How has he gotten this exemption? Like
Yeah.
that, we should be angry at that, at how it's happened.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
yes, like be angry at him too, but like,
Yeah. He was walking.
why is this happening?
He was walking around near kids in Serbia while he was still positive, and he knew he was positive for COVID. And this guy just didn't give a f. He just didn't give an f.
Okay, now I'm angry.
Yeah,
Put him in
right?
jail. Just put the fucker in jail.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I was listening to NPR, and the morning show that I listen to while I'm at work. They went over the whole story, and it's like, wow, this guy sounds like a freaking a-hole.
Mm. Yeah.
So
That really angers me about the kids thing.
oh yeah, dude, right? He
And
doesn't
this
just
is like a well-known tennis player. Like,
yeah, he's huge,
he's-
dude. He's
Yeah.
like huge. He was gonna get I don't know. My girlfriend was watching him play tennis in some of the big events a couple of months ago, and I'm like, who's this dude? And she goes, blah 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 blah.
Novak Djokovic.
That's the dude. And yeah. Yep. And so when I heard the story about him in Australia, I'm like, And then I heard more about the story. It's like, wow, he just seems to be a jerk. Another victim of that.
And it keeps going. Look at this. The latest, he admits leaving quarantine.
Yeah. Well,
as well. While he was meant to be locked down.
Yeah, he strikes me as just another affluent anti-vaxxer who thinks they can do whatever they want because they're a celebrity. And if anything, he's gotten special treatment by the Australian government. He hasn't been like targeted by the Australian government. He's been given, if he was targeted by the Australian government, they wouldn't have even let him into the freaking country to begin with, since he wasn't following the rules.
Are you ready for this? Djokovic said his support team completed his travel declaration and they ticked the incorrect box in an act of human error.
That's what we call BS. And when you hear that, everyone, your BS lights should be like going on. So let's take him at his word for a second. All right, even though that's a lie. Because he has a history of being a selfish prick. But let's say for a minute that that's true. That once you realize that your team has made the wrong decision, what do you do? How do you make it right? Well, you leave the effing country. That's what you do. Right? If you were acting in good faith. But that's the thing. The man isn't acting in good faith.
Right. He could have rectified it by his own actions. Just because it was checked off on a piece of paper doesn't make it so.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question. Oops, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just missed part of it because of toddler temper tantrum. What country is this guy a citizen of?
Serbia.
Okay. For a second I thought he was Australian, and I was like, what's your prison system look like? Because I know in America we have a lot of nonviolent drug offenders, and we could fill them up with idiots like this. Could just switch them out.
Yes, he is Serbian, going into Australia for a some kind of tennis event, some kind of big tennis open in Australia thing. Maybe the Australian Open. I don't know. I'm not a tennis fan, to tell you the truth.
Why do sports people always seem to get a pass? It's like high school never ends. Like, I know in my high school, the football players would have chewing tobacco in class with their nasty Gatorade bottle filled with their spit out chew, and they could get away with anything. But if
Yeah.
if someone
You
thought my skirt was
kidding
too
me?
short, I would get put in detention.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I can see that, Jesse Bear. I grew the high school that I went to, absolutely crap for academics, more or less. Brockton, the city that I grew up in, is regularly put in one of the lowest of the three spots in terms of how good your education is, right? How good the high school is in Massachusetts. So it's typically Brockton is either the lowest or the second or third lowest, and we trade spaces with New Bedford and Fall River, I think, are the other two cities that are like horrible. But we had a great football team. We had a great football team, and that's all that really counted.
That's what my school did too. We had a really good football team. Everything else, kind of shit.
That's a good question, Dr. Mordecai. Did Andy hit the like button? And this is how horrible I am as a YouTuber. I did not hit the like button until you just mentioned it right there. So thank you.
Yeah, this can come back around to the equality, of like what we began talking about this morning.
Yeah.
Like making sure that things are equal. And I wonder too, sometimes if they ever think about the people who are maybe not racist but still promote like ideas that kind of perpetuate racism. Like if they ever think about what if the tables get turned and you are the one who is being actually targeted? I wonder if that ever goes through their mind. And
Well,
I think that's like something we definitely need to work on as a society.
The one thing that, if one of the themes on this channel is that Nazis are stupid, Nazis were not the Supermen that we've been led to believe in history class when we were growing up. They had stupid policies. They had, there was a whole system, a whole infrastructure of stupidity that made National Socialists stupid. And it's the same type of thinking when you look at, the anti-maskers, the MAGA people, the white supremacists here in this country. It's just, wow, you are just aggressive and dumb by and large.
I think the idea of making somebody like that like an evil genius versus just evil is to kind of make ourselves feel better in a way. Well, it's not our fault that they were so bad because they're smarter than us.
Right.
It's like as a way to almost forgive yourself.
So think about the because let's look at the Russians who lost something like 26 million people in World War II. They can't really say, wow, we really made bad policy decisions and allowed the Nazis to really get the upper hand on us for a couple of years in World War II. We're going to forget that we made a peace agreement with the Nazis in 1939. We're going to ignore the fact that the Soviets invaded Poland along with the Nazis to divide up that country. It's far better for the Russian people to think Nazis are supermen and evil, right? As against to really being honest about their role in the catastrophe.
Did you say 20 to 26 million?
Yes. The Soviets lost an insane number of people in that war. It was a war of genocide.
Put that in perspective, my country has a population of 22 million.
Whoa.
That's wiping out Australia plus.
Yeah. People don't understand the level of death that was on the Eastern Front, from the invasion to the genocide squads, the execution squads, to the intentional starvation of the Russian people. It was a complete disaster for the Russians, for the Soviet Union, for the Ukrainians. Excuse me.
I was actually watching a documentary about that, and one of the points they one of the things they pointed out about how the Russians made a bad decision is their leader at the time kept assuming that the at the time the Nazi party leaders had sense and would think about things strategically, like, oh, he won't open up two fronts, so I can trust him. No, he wasn't smart. He didn't think strategically. So that's why they ended up getting effed over, because they kept assuming, like, oh, they're going to be pragmatic, and they just weren't.
Well, here's the thing about autocratic systems in general is that they're stupid, right? So you have Joe Stalin, right, who was in charge of the Soviet Union at the time, dictator, effectively, of the Soviet Union. And he ignored all the signs of German troop movements to the border. He ignored British intelligence saying, hey, they're going to attack you really soon. Not only that, but out of his arrogance, he placed a lot of the military formations right up close to the border. One of the strengths of the Soviet Union, of the Russian Federation, is how freaking big it is. And so they did not use that to their advantage in the first days of the invasion. They put all of their troops up right at the front of the border. And so the Germans could just basically encircle, destroy, and just keep rolling. It was a series of catastrophic mistakes by the USSR that got them into such a perilous position.
Damn.
Which just reiterates your points that they're all stupid.
Yeah, because that's the nature, right? That's the nature of these rigid hierarchies, whether it's the Catholic Church, whether it's the Soviet Union, or Nazi Germany. Rigid hierarchies. If you've ever been in a rigid hierarchy, the one thing as an intelligent person, you realize it's like, wow, this is really freaking stupid. It's like the rigid hierarchies specifically make people more stupid, right? Because there's less communication, you have greater chances of groupthink. Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, Stalin even assassinated, murdered a bunch of his generals that had been telling him for a long time, like, hey, they're here, like, they're coming, like, because when push finally came to shove and they had to actually fight, he was like, oh, well, you screwed up. And it's like, I told you.
It's an interesting thing about what goes on. Well, this is the important thing about staying up with the literature and with scholars. So yes, there was a huge purge of the Russian military prior to the invasion. However, a lot of the generals that Stalin sacked, from what I understand, were old school guys from the Civil War during the 20s. So these were people who were not really up to date with current tactics. So even though the military did suffer a bit from the purges, what it allowed is that a lot of the newer blood to go up higher into the ranks. Also, once the war did start, Stalin took a lot of the people that he purged back from Siberia and said, oh, by the way, you got your old jobs back. Good luck. Oopsie, I made a mistake.
Because he's stupid.
Yeah, and that's the thing, too. It's, yeah.
One thing I did also, I went on a World War II kick.
Oh, good.
Last week and was watching a bunch of stuff. I'm a history nerd, and I go back and forth between what time frame of history I'll binge information on. And I was also watching a lot of documentaries about the lost children from World War II that were kidnapped from Poland and Sweden and other places, and as part of the eugenics program.
Yeah.
Because let's say there was a good German family, but they didn't look Aryan enough to procreate, so they would kidnap these children that quote unquote looked Aryan, mostly from Poland, because you tend to have a little bit more of the blonde hair, blue eyes. And they were like, oh, well, the Aryans just got scattered, so we're going to bring them back to the motherland, or whatever the hell stupid racist verbiage they used. Yeah. And then they would give them to these people that were good Germans but didn't look Aryan enough to procreate. So they weren't allowed to have their own kids, but they would give them kids that were kidnapped. And the parents of these children were often put into concentration camps or just gassed immediately so that they could never get their children back. And there's actually been a big issue. Now, mind you, these kids are now incredibly elderly. There's not a lot of them left that have been currently fighting with the German government to get reparations. It's not a lot, but they just want to be acknowledged as victims of the war because their entire lives were turned upside down. Whereas on the other hand, Poland is giving these people reparations. So people that currently live in Poland that were stolen children are getting reparations. It's only like, I think like whatever their currency is, it's like $200 a month, but it's just, they appreciate being acknowledged as victims, whereas the German government has been giving them crap. And the one survivor, the man, he's like, I feel like they're just waiting for us to die so they don't have to acknowledge that this happened.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And the thing is governments are not these monolithic organizations. Like the German government is, and we covered this story. They're what amounts to reparations in Namibia, which is right by South Africa, because Namibia was German Southwest Africa during the colonial period, and so they're going to be paying out some what amounts to reparations for some people down there. But it's definitely something that if they did do these things, then reparations will not wash the sin away. But if you do something wrong, you should try to make it right. You should make a good faith effort at it.
Yeah, and from what the again now elderly, but the stolen children said is they just want to be acknowledged.
Sure. Yeah.
And they're like, nothing will change the fact that, my parents were taken away. They were murdered. I was forced to learn a new language, not allowed to speak my native language, completely ripped away from my entire heritage.
Yeah.
But to at least say like, hey, we know this happened and it's not right. That's all they're looking for.
Yeah.
And the guy did say, he's like, so many people make victim a dirty word. He's like, I am a victim. Something outside of my control messed with my life and hurt me. He's like, I didn't do anything to deserve that. I am a victim, and it's okay to be a victim.
Sure. We shouldn't be victim shaming. I know that sounds radical, right? I mean, if something happened to you beyond your control, you were just cold cocked by life, then it's I'm not going to make you feel bad for being on the shit end of the stick. And you're right, Chris and Maria, it sounds like the residential schools. Yeah.
That is what it made me feel like, reminded me of is, same idea minus the murdering of the parents is, ripping these children away and destroying their culture from them internally.
Yeah.
It's just, doesn't matter where it happens, it's wrong.
And I think that, to bring it back to American politics, I think as more people, as that generation is vanishing, right? Because let's face it, most of them are in their 90s at this point. I was working with a guy who actually came over here when he was 7 on a steamer in a convoy. And one of the ships in the convoy was sunk by a U-boat. He said he distinctly remembers, the ship going down. Those people not being with us anymore, they acted, at least in part, as a bulwark against fascism, right? They acted as at least they were here to give witness to what happens in fascist regimes. And without them, I think we lose a lot.
I think that's one of the great things about technology now, though, is that as, we can video all these different people that have been victimized by regimes like this or tactics like the native children being stolen away. They will all pass away soon, but we need their stories, and to be able to do these videoed interviews keeps that memory of that to future generations so that we don't continue to make these same stupid, horrific mistakes.
Right. There's the Anne Frank, I think I've talked about this before, the Anne Frank Society, or the that goes around doing Holocaust education, basically. we need, fully funded institutions like that to make sure that kids understand what really happened, in Europe during the Second World War. And an extent, there should also be an active discussion, of course.
And all over the world. Like, let's not forget, Australia has a stolen generation that's, not long from passing from this earth. And it for a long time it was called the secret generation because it wasn't spoken about. And we need to get these stories out there while we still have the first-hand accounts.
Exactly. Yeah.
That was one thing. Oops, sorry.
No, go ahead, Jesse.
I was just gonna say that was my most of you know my grandmother recently passed away. But that was one thing that she always made sure to talk to us about. She was 91, so she was a child during World War II. But she had an older brother that was away at war, and she remembers just like she had family in Germany. My grandmother's parents had, I think her grandparents were the immigrants that came over to the U.S., but they had extended family in Germany. They cut them off when the war started, and because they didn't agree. Her parents didn't agree with what was happening. But she even just remembers, just from the American side, like how many families had a gold star. There was so much death. If anyone doesn't know, World War II, most Americans would hang a blue star banner by their door for any sons they had that were fighting, and if your son passed, you got a gold star. But she just remembers how much death and destruction. She would always tell us. She'd end up, a little teary-eyed, but holding it back, but you could see it, just talking about like it was so bad, and she's like, and I only experienced it on this side. She's like, can you imagine what it was like for the people in Europe? And she kept that alive with us, that hatred does nothing good for anyone.
Well, it's infectious. That's what it is too. You just see how you just have to look at a Trump rally, right, or a MAGA rally, or to see how infectious hate can be. The whole thing, the January 6th riots, right, the insurrection. That's a classic example of the madness of crowds, of what happens when people get all jazzed up and directed by a leader to go do something crazy.
And she hated Trump for that.
What's that? Same. Yeah.
What did you say, Jesse?
Oh, I was just saying, my grandmother hated him for that. He scared her.
And
Didn't
I
mean
was
to talk
just
over
saying,
you.
oh, that's okay. That was like my grandfather. He was G'd up to the point of being desperate to join the SS Youth. But he was too young, too young. So they put him to work in a galley on a ship.
Oh yeah,
cooking food,
peeling potatoes.
That ship was captured, thankfully, because long story short, here I am today to be telling this story. But and he fled. Long story short, he fled France with my grandmother and my father and uncles, because he didn't want them to have to do conscription, which was, I think it's still part of French. They do it like a national service, 4 years, but I think they can choose to do clerical stuff as well. But back then, you just had to go and join the army. And my grandfather had such PTSD from the things that he witnessed and went through. And this was, you know, as a Nazi, not as a Jew or as, you know, a prisoner of the Germans. This was as a German. He was still had PTSD.
Yep.
So he didn't want his sons to have anything to do with the army or war.
I could see that.
I can understand that too. My husband's a veteran, and he always says, you know, we have a savings account for our kids for college because that's the main reason he enlisted in the early 2000s. He's like, I don't want them to have to do that.
Yeah.
Not something the human psyche, I think, is really capable of dealing with properly.
No. And once again, you know, you have one of the reasons also that we have such a strong MAGA movement is because you have all, you know, a white supremacist movement in this country, is that you have a bunch of people coming back from war, from the forever wars, right? But you know, people who had long deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq, got their bells rung, have minor brain injuries, and they come back to the States. They find it difficult to readjust to life, and those are people who naturally flow into these kind of extreme movements. You know, wars are so toxic to democracy in so many different ways, and this is just one of them.
Yeah, I feel like once you've gone through that type of traumatic event, you swing one of two ways. You either go, like, you know, more towards democratic socialism and being very anti-war, or you lean into your trauma and you just want to cause more chaos and more trauma to everyone else. Because I guess, and I'm obviously not a mental health professional, but like, hurt people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you want everyone else to be just as traumatized as you so that you're not alone.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking with Jason over at Dragons in Genesis, one of the conversations we had on this channel, and he mentioned that after World War II, the amount of serial killers in this country jumped up because you had a bunch of these people, a bunch of these guys who were in the Pacific or in Europe who were traumatized, head injured, and you know, you might already have like, you know, you might have a tendency towards that kind of craziness, but these events trigger the behavior, right? So you might just be kind of like a serial killer in waiting, but you go into war for a couple of years, then you come back and you're like, well, this is just who I am now.
Shit, you could be a person who loves math and like has really wonderful curiosities that are totally, you know, all right, and then get the right knock on your head, and that
goes.
Well,
yep,
it's
you
like
are
that,
completely different.
I don't know that anything happened to him. It was just a case of he didn't know that it was over. But what about that? I think it was a Vietnamese guy who was deep in the jungles and never got the message the war was over.
There were a bunch
and
of Japanese.
They found him like years and decades later.
There was a phenomena of many Japanese, or a significant amount of Japanese soldiers who were just stuck on these atolls, small island chains, never heard that Japan had capitulated, that they had surrendered, and they had to like bring previous officers, previous other soldiers in the Japanese Imperial Army, right? This is during peacetime. This is, you know, and they had to bring them in to convince these guys that, hey, the war's really over. Hey, we really did surrender, and it's okay for you to come out. There were a bunch of those situations happening, and you know what people don't understand about the war in the Pacific is that it really was a religious war. In a lot of ways, the emperor was a religious figure for the Japanese, as well as an oil war. It's the absolute freaking worst aspects of our species at the same time. You have like this addiction to fossil fuels, as well as mixed together with a religious fervor.
Didn't that also happen during the Civil War? There were a lot of Confederate soldiers that didn't know the war was over for quite a while.
Well, there were irregular throughout the war. There were irregulars, right? I think the outlaw Josie Wales, I think it was the first movie Clint Eastwood directed. It was kind of based on that, about after the war, but there were people who were part of these irregular militias who did horrible things during the war, and they had to come to grips with it. But yeah, there were people in far-flung territory, sure. I don't think it was as prevalent as the World War II, because of the fact that it was such a larger territory. The Pacific is a huge expanse, and people just So then something similar probably, but not as much as World War II in the Pacific.
Okay, that's where my grandfather was over in the Pacific during World War II. He wasn't over in Europe.
Very different war in the Pacific than in Europe. Very different war. It was a jungle war.
Yeah.
It was a nasty war. It was more like Vietnam, like the horrors that you would see in Vietnam in terms of holes in the ground, tunnels, a nasty war. It wasn't, Europe wasn't a cakewalk either. You just have to ask the Russians. They lost 26 million people. But it was a different experience for the States, for people here in the United States. The Pacific War was far nastier, dirtier.
Yeah, my grandfather got lucky. He was a pilot.
Oh, yeah.
He was actually stationed in Australia. So he never actually saw a lot of the really horrible stuff because he was just flying the plane.
Yeah.
So he didn't. He flew a bomber. So
okay.
He was driving the plane. He wasn't. And I guess he separated it in his mind that he wasn't actually hurting anyone. The bombardier was.
People do kind of rationalize those kind of behaviors. Yeah. And you do what you can to keep yourself sane.
Yeah, so he managed to get out mental health wise a lot better than boots on the ground people did.
Yeah.
But yeah, he always would talk, and he passed when I was very little, so I have very few memories, but I do remember him saying he loved Australia.
Yeah.
But that he hated the reason he was there, because he didn't want to go to war, but he knew, I guess his draft number was a highly, how do I phrase this? He knew he was going to get picked, so he enlisted in the Army Air Corps.
Smart.
In the hopes that he would not die.
Yes. Yeah.
He's like, if I'm up high, I'm less likely to be killed.
Yes. I can definitely see that reasoning. This is interesting. Theo from the chat says he comes from German Jewish descent. The German family was named Freundlich, which means friendly in English, to which some changed their name in the U.S. Interesting, Theo. If anyone's interested in learning more about the Pacific War, Dan Carlin, who does Hardcore History, the podcast, he does a great bit recently. He just finished it, and he only drops 2 episodes a year, 3 episodes a year, but they're 4 or 5 or 6 hour long episodes. But Hardcore History, you just got to look through, and the most recent episodes are about Japanese and the U.S. in World War II. It's an interesting look at the Japanese form of governments, because once again, rigid hierarchies are dumb, and the decision-making process in Imperial Japan definitely mirrored that.
Oh, that's interesting. I tend to have a harder time finding information on the Pacific end of the war, where it seems like the European end of World War II, there's a lot more available information, because I guess just they're both horrible, but I guess the Holocaust just piques people's curiosity more, because obviously both ends were horrible, but I guess we should probably give some of that credit to Otto Frank for the Anne Frank diary. That really brought a lot of attention to that end, whereas I don't feel like there's a lot of published information with the same fervor to get people to read it for the Pacific side of the war, whereas Anne Frank diary was required reading in my middle school.
Sure. Yeah.
I read that.
I think how you see the play depends on where you sit. So I think if we're on in China, then we're going to learn a lot more about the Asian Pacific War in World War II. Because, of course, the Japanese were all into China starting from 1933. The European War didn't start until 1939. But a lot of people can make an argument that, once Japan started taking large chunks of Chinese territory, that's when the war in the Pacific started. Yeah, so I think that Chinese students probably learned a lot more. They're like, yeah, something happened in Europe. We know that it was bad, but do you know about the rape of Nanking, where 300,000 civilians were killed by Japanese soldiers? Yeah, we just don't.
That definitely would make sense. That they obviously, wherever it affects you more. Whereas the only thing I really remember growing up learning about the Pacific side of World War II was Pearl Harbor, and that's pretty much all my school that I can recall covered was the Pearl Harbor attacks and how horrible that was. And I was like, oh, and what happened? And they're like, and over to Germany. And I'm like, wait, what happened? And they're like, well, we're going to learn about the Holocaust now. And I'm like, but what happened over there?
Yeah. And it just shows you how crap the American teaching of history is. Because I remember something similar to that.
Yeah. And it was funny, just speaking to history growing up. We got new history textbooks my senior year of high school. Now, mind you, we all lived through 9/11. It was in our new history book. We all got kind of insulted because a lot of my classmates lost people in 9/11 or knew people that lost people, or like the area I grew up in, a lot of people commuted to, parents commuted to New York City to work.
Sure.
My own father was working actually at Newark Airport that day. So he saw it. He does construction, and he was on the roof. He saw it. And we were all terrified because, I mean, we all remember, and my dad, I knew he was working at an airport. So I was like, oh my gosh, he didn't get home until, I want to say 11 p.m. because of all the shutdowns on the bridges and stuff that day. But my classmates were all kind of insulted because we were like, hey, we lost people. Like, why is this in our history book? And it was a paragraph.
A paragraph. Yeah.
A paragraph and the photo of the plane flying into the second building, which was, we were all in middle school when it happened. So it was pretty traumatizing to see that photo in our book. And we told our teacher, we are not reading this. We are not doing a test on this. Like we were all very adamant because we were all still, dealing with it. We had friends as seniors that had signed up to go fight in the war. We were like, nope. This is insulting. Like, we'll take the old book. Thank you.
I don't want to make light of that, but even if they just showed Attack of the Clones, right, the Star Wars, because George Lucas may not be great with a lot of things, but he understands how democracies fall into fascism when they're in these long wars, right, when they overreact. And I think it was out right around the same time of the invasion of Iraq, or the second invasion of Iraq by Bush the Younger. And if I was going to write something about 9/11 in history books, I would say especially at the time, there would be a large red star, a big asterisk going, beware of overreacting and making large mistakes, and creeping militarism.
Yeah. Well, and that was something I remember as a kid. Right after 9/11, there was this, and I'm assuming it's obviously a different perspective for everybody depending on what age they were, but as middle schoolers right afterwards, we all kind of started to get radicalized.
Yeah.
As far as like, oh, we need to get them, we need to get payback, and being, so close emotionally, a lot of my classmates to the area and what had happened. We all started to get radicalized. We actually had a very calm and good history teacher at the time that he put off lessons for a couple days and let us all vent our frustrations and explained to us how we needed to stop being radicalized, and we needed to realize that it was individuals that did this and not an entire country, and that hate breeds hate and brought us all back down to reality.
That's good. It's once again, it's important for us as skeptics and humanists to do the work when times are good, right? To talk and try to build the bulwarks, try to build the structures of skepticism and humanism. So when times do go bad, when things do go sideways, there's less of a chance of things going horribly wrong. Sammy, I see that you have a video you want to share us. What do you got, brother?
Yeah, it's a 50-second TikTok, and it's not shocking or anything. I think it makes a good point. Just play it and then
All right, we'll let it roll.
See what we think.
All right.
Oh, I have to press play.
I think you have to hit press, yes.
Okay, tell me, what the hell is this?
On my own, here we go.
I'm wide awake and I contemplate these awful thoughts that... This is some shit your boomer aunt would post on Facebook. Surprised it didn't have minions in it. Oh, how dare James Charles have fun in a Santa dress. Anyone remember the good old days of mass teenage death? And yeah, I get that the meme is saying people like James Charles wouldn't be able to handle the war, but people in the war couldn't handle the war. That's why PTSD exists. And sure, maybe this generation wouldn't be able to handle a war, but the generations before that wouldn't be able to handle plowing the fields at 5 a.m. for your feudal lord. And the one before that wouldn't be able to handle spearing a mammoth for breakfast. That's called progress. And it's a good thing. And just to really fuck with that whole boomer Facebook meme argument, here are some actual photos of World War II soldiers cross-dressing for fun. I'm wide awake and I contemplate these awful thoughts that populate my brain, but I just can't concentrate. I had a positive.
Yeah, that's very fitting. Quite fitting. Yeah, that's the thing, is that boomers forget how much they were crapped on by their parents. And there was a lot of crapping too. Xers forget how much they were crapped on by their parents. And it's like this collective amnesia. It's collective amnesia about how wrong they were, how much crap they got put on them. And Taylor, I said in the video that I dropped last night when Jack and I were talking about Dave Chappelle and Patton Oswalt, is like the comedian Taylor Tomlinson, great comedian. She said about her dad is that he just didn't get the software update. He just didn't get the software update. And that's the thing about being intellectually curious and being flexible in how you think about the world and being able to take in new information. And let's face it, a lot of people just can't do it. And I've gotten to the point, being a 53-year-old man, that I'm going, when I see other people my age going, I don't think there's a good chance that maybe you don't get it. Maybe, perhaps, probably. There's going to have to be some kind of remedial education going on.
Well, I think it's important that we're continuously updating ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, you have to, or you do become that old man.
Oh, yeah, dude.
That,
Well,
because I find myself saying kids these days, but, am I doing the very thing that he just made that point about?
Yes, exactly. It's important to be agnostic, or just to hold in. If you don't understand something, it's okay to say, I don't understand this, without having to make a value judgment really fast. But the thing is that, with social media, stupidity gets reinforced really quickly, so that you have all these people making jokes about the younger generation. And it's like, they get the likes, they get the nods, they get the shares. And it's just condensed stupidity. That's what it is. It's just condensed, ignorance. Yeah.
Well,
all right,
I was just going to say, oops, sorry.
We'll let you have the final word.
I was just going to say that kind of thinking plays into survivor bias. Like, well, I turned out fine, so it's okay to, beat your kids with a belt. You actually didn't turn out fine. You survived.
Yeah. You're alive, but
you're not okay. On
those
that
beatings didn't do good things to your brain.
No.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to do the same crazy thing tomorrow. That's if the channel still exists. I don't know. We'll see what happens. We're playing Russian roulette with YouTube algorithm, everyone. Thanks for your support. Shamla Hamla.
Shamala hamla.
Shamala hamala.
And